Arizona star wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan is arguably the best receiver in the 2025 NFL draft class. Is he more like Drake London or Mike Evans? We're going to talk about this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast. Cover your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. You know, I got to kick this intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. Keep talking to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, man, other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. Go ahead, hit that like button. Make sure you comment after each segment, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel with the best NFL draft content there is, the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. DP, we're going to start at the top, man, with wide receiver one, what people are calling wide receiver one, Tetairoa McMillan. We're going to say that name a lot. We have to make sure we get that right. Then we're going to go down to Tennessee, man, talk about James Pearce, the edge rusher, who some people are saying is edge one. And then we're going to talk about a sleeper running back that I'm sure my guy, Mr. DP, has scouted, Mr. Justice Ellison. Well, all right, DP, let's get this conversation started.
Tetairoa McMillan, listed at 6'5", 210 pounds. Keith, the star wide receiver for those Arizona Wildcats that should potentially make the college football playoffs. They're a talented team, and you look at what he was able to do. Remember, guys, if you don't remember, go back to this past draft season. A couple months ago, we had Arizona's wide receiver Jacob Cowing on the show, and he talked about Tetairoa McMillan. He talked about T-Mac, and as successful as Jacob Cowing was, Tetairoa McMillan had 90 receptions, 1,402 receiving yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns. And Keith, when I watched him, because having to watch Jacob Cowing, he kept popping up on tape for me. Watching Travis Hunter as a corner, those two battled it out when Colorado faced Arizona in a very high-scoring matchup. And I was like, man, this guy looks like Drake London, but he kind of gives me that Mike Evans type of feel in terms of stretching the field vertically, catch point, route running, can play inside, play outside. You did the deep dive into him. Do you agree with those two kind of player stylistic comps?
Yeah, I agree, especially. And when I was watching him last night to kind of wrap him up, that's the guy that came up was Mike Evans, right? Because I'm like, man, who is a big 6'4", 6'5", can box you out type wide receiver, right? And I thought of Brandon Marshall, and I'm like, I just use that for Keon Coleman, right? Then you just kind of go through the Rolodex of the NFL. Then I thought of, I'm like, hey, is this guy like a rookie Puka Nacua, right? That's another name that they got brought up that I thought of when I was watching him, but he's a couple inches taller than Puka. And then that's when I thought of Mike Evans. I'm like, you know what? That's not a bad comp right there at all, man. This guy, he's every bit of 6'4", right? You big body, physical. And you know what it is? It's the same exact thing. And the comp is probably spot on in a sense. When we talk about, did we, just bringing up the Mike Evans name, we both thought of him. And the reason I say it's spot on is because Mike Evans, when we talk about off coverage, right, and this is something that T-Mac does really well, he can still stem defenders, right? At the top of the route, he has that rocker step to him, even though he's 6'4", there's some fluidness there with him. And then I think it's the same thing with Mike Evans, right? There are certain moments where you feel like Mike Evans can pull away defenders, and then there's certain moments where you're like, hey, how fast is he, right? And some of the same things with T-Mac. But yeah, T-Mac, listen, route running, I think I've seen this guy have a mixed bag of releases, right? He can do the diamond step, just different things. He's very versatile in what he can do. Then getting into the route, for a 6'4" guy, he can sink his hips, get in and out of breaks. They do align him in the slot a decent amount. He's a guy that will go in motion. So I thought about all of these new age NFL offenses where we talk about, hey, can this receiver beat press coverage? Well, they don't necessarily have to beat that much press coverage because usually they're in some type of stacked alignment, staggered alignment, or they're in motion, right, to where the DB can't get hands off on them immediately. But I do like T-Mac, and I was just like, okay, hey, where do we place this guy, in context of even last year's draft? And I think it would have been an interesting conversation, right? Because he is such a big-bodied guy, and I think we know Marvin Harrison Jr. went one, and then I think he would have probably forced some teams to consider or have the conversation between him and Malik Neighbors. And Malik is a different style wide receiver, but because he is 6'4" and potentially that big body, box you out, throw the fade route, all of those type of things, right? He would probably make you have the discussion of taking him early, just like we seen with the Drake London draft, right? Drake London went first, and it was probably because they may have felt more comfortable with his size and body profile. Now, not saying that that's the right decision, right? Because you still had Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jahan Dotson. That was Jameson Williams, right? That was a loaded draft. But I think he was the one guy that stood out from a size perspective.
No, 100%. I think if Tetairoa McMillan was in last year's draft class, he's in that top 4, top 3. He's battling with Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze. And it's crazy because
that's another name. That was another name I thought
Rome?
of. Rome. I thought of Rome and Mike Evans. That was the two names I thought of when I was watching T-Mac.
No, he's fluid, and you like talking about prototypical X receivers, Marvin, Rome, Tetairoa, and then you have Malik, who's more of that Z slot movement guy. And I absolutely think he would have made teams not only, all right, do we want Malik Neighbors? Like if you're the Giants, you're like, man, we got some small guys, we got some fast guys. We don't have a true X. If they're sitting there, McMillan's available, then it's like, okay, do we go with Tetairoa? Do we go with Malik? Do we consider Rome? Whatever the case may be. And I think he would have made it a real conversation for that wide receiver 2-3 situation last year. But in this class, like I think he's probably going to be the guy that's going to spearhead the charge for majority of the season, especially because, like I said, the hip, the ability to sink his hips, like he runs whip routes, pivot routes, and I'm just like,
he don't just do it. Like yeah, he don't just do it once. Like he runs whip routes a lot. Like that's what I noticed. I'm like, okay, they really trust this big boy. And it's anytime it was a 3x1 set and he was to the single side, he would be condensed. And it's like, so that way he still has that outside leverage, right, to get away. He did it I watched multiple games and he did it multiple times. And I was like, okay, this guy can win in this fast. And I just think that he profiles to be an easy, high volume target, right? Because he is 6'4", because he can run routes. Now, is he the most explosive guy? Like, you're not going to confuse him with a Julio Jones or some of these other top wide receiver prospects, like in the big lexicon of wide receivers that we've seen, right? But I think that he's a good player overall, and I think that he will be an easy volume target. And having watched him and having watched Luther Burden, he does what Luther Burden does. And he's also 6'4", and he still has the short area quickness, has that element to his game. So I can see right now to where T-Mac will be positioned to be above Luther Burden. We talk about in the wide receiver conversation.
No, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's how it plays out next draft. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, like there's certain things you can't teach, Keith. They say you can't teach speed, which is true, right? Like you can't make someone run a 4.3. But you also can't stretch a 5'10" receiver to make him 6'5". You know what I mean? It's just some certain things you can't teach. And I think that Mike Evans comp is going to stick with him the entire way. I think that Mike Evans comp, like Mike, I will say Mike coming out of Texas A&M was a more explosive or deep, a faster player coming out. That was a guy that in the SEC was running by Bama DBs. You know what I mean? That long stride, just be able to stretch the field vertically, but the ball skills, the fluid movement. Then Mike Evans was good after the catch, and I see a lot of that with T-Mac too, being able to catch that short pivot route or whip route, and then
turn it upfield.
And turn it upfield. And I think he's going to be in that top 10 for sure, in my opinion, once we get to, if he has another season just like how he had last year. And crazy enough, year one, he had 700 yards, I think like 5 touchdowns, and he doubled it up with 1,400 in year 2 and 10 touchdowns. I'm excited to see what he does in year 3.
Yeah, and the way he profiles as a player, um, easy to get the ball to him. So I was looking at the production also yesterday, and I could easily see him being a another 14, 1,500, 1,600 yard guy, just because they get the ball to him with so much ease. The quarterback could be back, right? They have a lot of good situations going on over there, Arizona, especially offensively. So we'll see how that thing goes. But DP, it's time to flip sides of the football, man, and I have to go with another guy that's supposed to be at the top of his position group, Mr. James Pearce, the edge rusher from Tennessee. We're going to have this conversation next.
Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your number one ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Why? Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your number one ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. James Pearce, edge rusher for those Tennessee Volunteers. And Keith, you said it. He's a guy, another guy is supposed to be at the very top of his position group, right? Coming listed at 6'5", 240. Keith, he had I went and looked at the numbers: 27 tackles, total pressures and hurries combined 78. He had 9.5 sacks. And this is a guy that, if you look at some of the way too early 2025 mock drafts, he was the first overall pick in some of them, where he was like, hey, he's the top edge rusher in the class. Keith, what did the tape tell you? Like, does the tape match the hype of James Pearce?
Yeah, so there are certain elements of the tape that match the hype and perspective of what he still can develop into, right? And when you see this guy, he's listed at 6'5", 240. So let's say if he's 6'4", 240 pounds, that's still more like that. That's enough height and length, right? When you talk about an edge rusher, he has first step quickness. This is a really good athlete on the outside. He's a guy that wants to put you in he wants to put the offensive tackles in one-on-one situations, DP, and beat them. And we talked about this, the basketball on grass situation. That's exactly what he wants to do. He wants to cross you over, meaning he wants to take an outside angle, cross inside, right? I just seen a clip going viral about Michael Parsons, right? Kind of doing the same thing. He was rushing as a stack, but as a, mugged in the A gap. But it was the same type of situation, right? Getting you going one direction and then crossing face to the other direction. A lot of his game is predicated on speed and just being a smooth athlete. And that's what you see. He's a guy that, like I said, it's the one-on-one situations. The least amount of contact that we can have, the better for me, right? Because I'm a better athlete than what most offensive tackles are. Now, the conversation, DP, is and then this is kind of where I want to live at as far as we talking draft prospects, we talk draft philosophies, right? And what is one of the draft philosophies that we can have a conversation of? Is there a weight threshold to an edge rusher? And I looked at some of these edge rushers in the past, right, that lived around that 240-ish range, and it's not a lot of them, DP, that have had a lot of success. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic. And what I mean is this: that most of the guys, I feel like they're around 250-ish at least, right? When you start getting into that 240, you get into the Bruce Irvins, but you also get into the Barkevius Mingos, you get into the Deion Jordans, you get into the Leonard Floyd, who has had a decent career thus far, right, playing in a complementary role. But you ask yourself, would you take that as a top 10 pick? And I think that's the conversation that's probably going to start to come up around James Pearce, especially if we get into official weights and things like that. And it's 238, 241. Because I like guys that have that speed to power conversion.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point and a good pull in terms of, there's not a lot of guys that have had high amounts of success at less than 245, less than 250 as a full-time edge, especially mainly because I know again basketball, the football analogy, like what do you do with a pass rusher? You want to take their legs out. How do you take their legs away from them? You run the ball. You lean on them. You know what I mean? You weaken their legs to where that 3rd and 10, they don't have as much juice. You know what I mean? As a guy who can hold up at the point of attack a little bit more because he has more muscle mass, more thicker lower halves, stuff like that. Where it's like basketball. How do you handle somebody? Tire somebody out? We seen the Celtics do it to the Mavs, right? They pull in Luka Doncic in every pick and roll. Let's tie those legs out, big fella. So you can't dribble and shoot and perform the way that you really want to because you're a little bit more tired. And I think for him, the arc I think that he probably should take is the Brian Burns in terms of getting up to 250. You know what I mean? Can you carry 250 to 255 and still have that first step explosiveness? Brian Burns, I've seen him in person for multiple times. When he was with the Panthers, explosive, bend, agile. You know what I mean? Just a fluid, loose mover, but he said still able to be that even at 250, 250 plus. And it's like, James Pearce, can you do the same thing? Because though I think the thing when I watched him, the little bit I saw of him, I was like, all right, he gets back there. He creates a lot of pressure. He can be a headache for offensive line. But I looked at him and you did the deep dive. I didn't see a lot. Sometimes I didn't really see a plan. You know what I mean? Like
No,
I didn't see a guy that knew what he was going to do.
Yeah, 100%. It's exactly that. It's a lot of I'm a better athlete than you. I'm gonna just go out here, and I don't want to say just run around, right, and make it seem like there's no process, but there's not a step 1, 2, and 3, right, to win in this situation. And even counter moves, right? I talked about the counter move of him going outside inside, but that's more of movement versus hand maneuvers and executing. You know what I'm saying? Like if I get this stagger step, what am I going to do? If I get a quick set, I'm going to adjust here. If I get a deep set, I'm going to adjust here. Like there wasn't, I didn't see that part to it. So that's the conversation, DP, that there's still a lot of upside, but also you talk about development and you talk about, hey, if you took this player as of now, if there was no development, where would you grade him, right? And I think that's the conversation that has to be had, because we do this with prospects all the time, is that we get into summer scouting, we get excited because we say, hey, this is year 2, and we assume that players are going to get better. Like, man, all they're going to do is get much better. And then we get there and then we're like, okay, maybe the development didn't happen like we thought it happened. So James Pearce, man, I like I said, I like a lot of the things that he executes as a player, but there's also some developmental upside to him that you have to kind of pull out. And if not, you're going to kind of be stuck in the middle ground of, where do I play this guy? What situation. Then you also have to talk about the run game too, being 240 pounds. If he's your starting edge and he's your guy that has to set the edge, right? It's like, as these big offensive tackles, you get a JC Latham trying to move him out the way. It's like, good luck with that. You know what I'm saying? You got your Talise Fuagas, right? If you just take this offensive tackle class that we just had and match that up against them, it's like, okay, very interesting conversation to be had. So there are some things that need to be worked on. But if you're talking about just a pure athlete, I can see the excitement for him in there.
No, 100%. And I think like as we're both talking about, just having a plan, but also having like the counters and how to set guys up. Like you remember we were, at the Senior Bowl 3 years ago, watched Jermaine Johnson dominate for 2 days. And one of the biggest takeaway was this man knew how he was going to attack every tackle he faced in practice. It wasn't the same rush, wasn't the same plan. He was very calculated and deliberate. By that second step, he knew if he was going inside or out. He knew if he was going double hand swipe. He just knew what he was going to do. There was a process, right? The method to the madness. There was a method to his approach on how he was going to dominate that rep. And I want to see that development from James, because like you said, just looking at this past class, right? Like, so if you can't get around Joe Alt, how are you going to win? If you can't get around, like, Olu Fashanu is an athletic tackle, right?
That's what I was about to say. And that's the thing with these, like, even like, let's take a step down from the very top, right?
Yeah.
Let's get into the Jordan Morgans. Let's get into the Matthew Bergeron from last class, right? Like these guys were athletic guys. You see what I'm saying? Like there were certain elements of their game that we thought needed to improve, but they were athletic guys. You talk about even the developmental players, right? The Rasheed Walker, right? That's in Green Bay. So it's winning pure off of athleticism. That I think there's a threshold to that once you in the NFL, enter the NFL, because usually they're more athletic offensive tackles. And I think that's where you kind of have to have the conversation with James Pearce, the development portion of a DP. But I'm ready to get into your guy, man, the sleeper running back, Mr. Justin Ellison. You know, we're doing this podcast, man. We talk about who nobody else is talking about, and DP found the one. So let's get into this conversation of the sleeper running back, Justice Ellison.
Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Justice Ellison played at Wake Forest to start his career, transferred to Indiana. Shout out to those Hoosiers. Their offense got two players so far that's popped to me that they might have a better offense in 2024 than they did in 2023. Listed as 5'10", 210 pounds. Young man that had a solid season last year, but Wake Forest's offense was just it was a little weird. You know what I mean? 120 carries, 548 rush yards, only one total touchdown on the season. He has a sturdy, compact build, low center of gravity. And I want everybody that's listening to remember a couple years ago, Kenneth Walker. When Kenneth Walker, he went that 1 year to Michigan State. He also transferred from Wake Forest. He was in that same style offense, and that's what I really like about Justice Ellison. I'm not saying he's going to have a Heisman campaign like Kenneth Walker did at Michigan State, but it's the fact of working in that deep, slow mesh RPO offense where in terms of the ball is still in the belly of the running back, probably 2 yards into the line of scrimmage, into the action, into the wash, and the bodies around them with the offensive line and defensive line battling. And what that offense does for a running back is, if you succeed in it, it showcases your quick twitch fibers, your muscles to be able to move quickly, exchange gaps, get in and out of the phone booth, be able to make defenders miss because you're literally right up on the defensive line, and the linebackers starting to, especially ones that are triggering downhill because they see the mesh point. But being able to get out of there, and not only get out of there, but find your way to daylight. And he does a good job of that. Like I said, that sturdy build. He has decent contact balance. Love his lateral agility and quickness. To me, he's a gap scheme fit for a team. In terms of what I want to see improve, I want to, like, from a zone standpoint, outside, not like the inside zone, but outside zone. I just feel like he's not processing and seeing it particularly well. But at the same time, you know what he is? Like I say, he's a gap scheme guy. He reads better from inside to out than outside to in. So for me, I want to see if Indiana runs, what type of concepts they're going to run with him to really allow him to flourish in this offense. Receiving production, you want to see more from him there because he has the athleticism, the build, and the body type and the frame to do so, and everything. I think he's, to me, he projects as pretty much like a RB2 or 3 to a team. You know what I mean? A guy that can come and spell your starter, and he could be on your team for multiple years. And if your starter goes down, you feel comfortable with him starting because is there a lot of upside, a high ceiling to him? No, not really. But at the same time, because Keith, you always talk about with running backs that top tier trait, that A trait, that elite trait. I don't see that with them, but at the same time, didn't see that with Blake Corum physically. Didn't see that with Kyron Williams physically. There's multiple running backs in the league right now that are making plays. Blake Corum, is a rookie, but we've seen with Kyron Williams, we've seen it with different guys throughout time, right? You know what I mean? Clyde Edwards-Helaire has had some success when he's been healthy with, when Andy Reid gives him the ball in Kansas City. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think with Justice Ellison, like, he's a sleeper guy, probably be a day 3 guy, but I really like what he's going to be able to bring to a team because he's willing to stand in and make blocks in pass protection, but also there's upside for him as a receiving back. So he can give you a multitude of things without having a high ceiling. Is he going to be Saquon Barkley? Absolutely not, guys. I'm not saying that. But can he be a productive professional running back and help your offense? 100%. And I think he has the skill set to do so.
Okay, I have a question. Is there a NFL running back or NFL backfield? Let's say running backs. There's a starting running back that you feel like, you know what, this guy pairs really good from a complimentary standpoint. Like, what is the I guess the matchup, right? Like, what's the that guy and he can do something different to complement it.
Ramondre Stevenson in New England. I think it's the first thing
Okay.
that comes to my mind. The guy that Ramondre could do everything too. He catches the ball, he runs the ball, stuff like that. But I think he would be a great kind of asset behind him. You think about, of course, they have Keaton Mitchell, but I think Baltimore were behind like Derrick Henry or even Indianapolis, right? Which I know they got some young backs there. Don't get me wrong, but I think behind Jonathan Taylor with Anthony Richardson, that read option QB, QB read zone read type of game, that RPO game that they run in Indy under Shane Steichen, to be another guy behind Jonathan Taylor. I think he will absolutely flourish if he was able to be that second back behind JT. I think there's a couple, James Conner and Trey Benson, right? Because he eventually had to be the backup to Trey Benson because James Conner is on an expiring deal. I think there's a couple backfields that he could be a very good change of pace style runner. And like I said, like he's downhill guy, good contact balance, good pad level, falls forward. I think he has good open field speed. He's not elite, so I don't think you should expect a lot of home run hits from him. But hey, man, sometimes I'm cool with doubles, singles. You know
Yeah,
what I
for sure.
mean? I'm cool
Especially
with
at
it.
the running back position. That's usually most times, right? That's the most effective when you consistently gashing those teams for 8 yards, 12 yards, 13 yards, a 21-yard run, and then you back at 7, right? And it's just
Mhm.
like the defense is just like, God dog, right? Like I rather that consistently than just one big run and then now you stop the rest of the
Yeah,
game.
2 yards of carry and then 160-yard. I'm like, man, you're
Yeah.
not helping this offense doing that, brother. Like, and one other name real quick to throw out there in terms of what he could be if he got the chance. I think about Jalen Warren with Pittsburgh. And
Mm.
Jalen Warren was a guy that I love. Jalen Warren coming out of Boise State. I was like, yo, this dude is built like Ray Rice, like Doug Martin, that short, compact build, good speed. You know what I'm saying? And then he could catch the ball. He could make plays in space, things like that. But, the NFL didn't view him as highly. But now you see what happens when you give
He's
guys that are talented a shot. And I think that Justice Ellison could do similar things as Jalen Warren. So despite where he may be drafted, this is a guy that can make plays, and all he needs is opportunity.
Yep, 100% with DP. That wraps up another Locked On NFL Draft podcast, man. I want to say shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Listen, man, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout for being our everydayers. On tomorrow's show or Monday's show, we can bring it back Mock Draft Monday. We find another mock draft that we're going to go over way too early 2025 NFL mock. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.